There's a threshold there.
Yes.
With legalese, if I pull up a case on Lexis and I just have you read a case, you will understand. Now, yes, you will.
I disagree. Here.
You may not understand it 100%. A random person.
Because I'm not normal. I was raised by a
I know. A random person. Okay. You may not understand it to its full extent. You may not understand the nuances. You may not know how to. You may not understand enough about the concept of precedent to know what the case means for society. Okay. But you will know what the judge is saying.
So here's the question.
You will understand the meaning of the words that he is using.
So if I take a contract, say some kind of simple contract, or not, and I want to understand it, and I take a dictionary and I look up the words to
You're
that
not
contract.
going to have to look up any words in the dictionary in order to understand. You're not.
Dude, you're way overestimating people's vocabulary.
Pull up. No. Pull up right now. No.
I'm talking about.
Pull up a thing.
Let's do an end user license agreement. That's
pull up.
contract.
No.
Right?
I'll do you one better.
Okay.
Pull up sample force majeure clause. I intentionally chose that because the name is a term. The name is a term of art, and so you're not going to know the name. You're not going to be familiar with the word force majeure.
Do you know? Say that. You're right. So say the name again.
Force majeure.
What language is that?
I believe French.
Latin.
Or Latin.
Okay. Actually, it's either Latin or French.
I believe it's French, but it could be Latin. I know.
Spell majeure.
So what I'm saying.
Spell majeure for me.
If you type in force M. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. So hold on. Before
you want a sample force?
Yes, sample force majeure clause. Before we read it on air, we're going to read it on air in a second. I have a caveat, okay? The caveat to what I'm saying is there are terms of art in the legal world that you're not going to understand unless you're familiar with yourself with it.
Yes.
But there aren't enough of those terms of art to warrant calling legalese its own distinct language.
See, I would argue that the terms themselves are the language, and we inject that language into English.
No, we've injected Latin into English. That's not its own language. We've just injected Latin into English. That's not legalese. It's Latin.
I don't consider Latin, but anyway.
I know. I'm saying
that's
you inject Latin into English.
And it becomes legalese? Is that
No.
Okay.
It's English with a little bit of Latin in it. That's all it is.
Legalese is?
Yeah. No, not legalese. I'm talking this clause.
Okay.
Is English with a little bit of Latin in it, but it is not its own language.
Okay, so I'm going to read this out loud. This is a random example.
Okay, so hold on, pause.
Okay.
Challenge for the audience, challenge for you. What is this paragraph saying? Now read it.
I want to add to that.
Okay.
Because I think there's more to this linguistically than just that. So first, what is the paragraph saying?
Yes.
I think also, if you want to actually understand it in the context that matters for a legal situation, what is this saying? Plus, what are the subtexts? What are the other extra informations that
that's where you get into dialect rather than whole other language?
And that's where I disagree. But first, let's just read through this.
Read it. And by the way, I picked this specifically because it has that Latin/French title.
Yeah.
Almost, we really don't use a lot of Latin in the law anymore. Mm-hmm. We really don't.
It has.
But this is one where we do. So read it.
Force majeure. No party shall be liable or responsible to the other party, nor be deemed to have defaulted under or breached this agreement for any failure or delay in fulfilling or performing any term of this agreement, except for any obligations to make previously owed payments for the other party hereunder, when and to the extent such failure or delay is caused by or results from acts beyond the impacted. Okay, so first of all, my eyes are glazing over a little bit. I'm reading it this way, by the way, because there are no periods. Is this a bad one?
No. What I'm going to say here is there is a problem in the legal world with run-on sentences.
Yes.
That is a problem.
Yes.
So
I would argue that is a feature of the language legalese.
No, it's a feature of English used in a particular context.
Let me make a caveat. I think legalese is
because
in large part,
and you're going to
modern language, modern legalese, I think, is actually very closely related to not old English, but old modern English. The
Middle
1800, no, modern English,
Oh.
but the older version.
Okay.
Modern means
Victorian English.
So there's Old English,
Victorian
Old English, and then Modern English, which goes from Shakespeare to now. So
Blackstonian English.
Blackstonian, maybe.
William Blackstone.
Okay,
Because
very maybe.
he was
Very
the most
maybe.
influential legal scholar on the American minds,
Fair
the
enough.
American founding minds.
So and you could call this a dialect of English, and I think, however, if we call it a dialect for our current, a dialect of English, I'm content with that. I think if something is an English dialect, I think personally that it would be more accurate to call it a language. Because
It is a language if you cannot understand what's going on without spending the time to learn it. So, hold on. You have to finish.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. I haven't finished.
Before you know what's going on, you have
Yes.
to finish the sentence.
Okay. Where was
So, you're not going to be...
impacted? Yeah, let's see. So I'm going to go back a little bit.
No party shall be liable or responsible for any failure to perform resulting from acts beyond the impacted party's reasonable control. So let's just put a period there.
Okay.
They didn't put a
So
period
he
there.
ignored, just so you know, he ignored like literally 30 words inside of parentheses.
And that, my friends, is how you lawyer.
That, my friends, is how you read legalese. You skip certain parts because you know in the language legalese there are parts that you don't read unless you need to, or they're only there
There are
for
parts
extra
that you
clarification.
skim because they're so boilerplate you already know what
That
that
is a linguistic.
It's a dialect.
It is not a
It is
dialect.
not. So,
that
for
is-
example, no, here's my point. If you read that whole sentence in all of its glory,
Mhm.
all you have to do, the only tool you need to understand it
Mhm.
is time to sit down and parse it out.
That's exactly how you learn language.
Except if that were Spanish, no amount of time reading that would allow me to understand. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my point. You do not
I
need a
want to-
dictionary
there's a caveat.
to read that force majeure clause.
If you are not very, so we both have gone through college and were raised by an attorney, and I know from dealing with a lot of people that I know that were not in the same position.
Moving the camera.
I know, I didn't mean to. It shouldn't be moving the camera.
Oh wait, yeah, the camera's right there. I'm an idiot.
Okay,
Ignore me.
cool. I was like, wait, am I using the wrong camera?
I'm stupid.
So I know from talking with a lot of people, our grasp of language is far from normal because our dad's a robot.
But that doesn't mean it's a
I like
different language. It just means that there's degrees of grasp of language.
What I'm saying is, we can't use our understanding of language as the basis for whether other people understand it because our vocabulary is very big.
Okay, but my premise is not impacted by that statement.
I'm setting that.
I agree, but my premise is not impacted.
Sure, I'm not
You
impacting.
can't. I cannot read a Spanish sentence without pulling up a dictionary and figuring out definitions.
Sure. What I'm trying to
Anybody
say,
who speaks English can, with enough time and devotion, and it may take some low IQ individuals a lot of time and devotion that they're unwilling to spend, but they are capable of understanding the meaning of that sentence
so
without a dictionary.
So-
what word in there would you need a dictionary to understand?
for most people,
Yeah.
unless they have experience with loans, which to be fair, it's a lot of people, but defaulted. That is a legalized term. In normally that means
Fair.
your default setting.
Okay, two
That's
seconds.
most
You got
people
one.
in it.
Any
So,
other word?
let's
Because
see.
if there's just one term of art that you don't know, that's not a whole language.
Oh, sure,
Just
sure.
one term of art.
Well, I'm arguing that the terms of art as a whole are a separate language that is.
But that's incomplete. That's not a whole language.
There was at least one more.
Okay. What does this
There
sentence
three.
mean?
What
does it mean?
I'm gonna have to read it again to be honest.
Read it
I don't
again.
remember.
No party. In fact, I'll shorten it
No,
for
no.
you. I'll shorten it
Okay,
for
tell me your version of it that is translated into English. You're literally translating for me.
No.
That's your job. You are a translator. What did someone hire an attorney to do? They had hired you to interpret.
But there are
Into
you can understand every single word on that list. I am helping you speak the dialect, but the language is the same.
So if a dialect requires an interpreter, unless you want to spend a very long time learning the dialect, doesn't that make it basically a language?
No. I'm saying the threshold is: is it possible to do it all on your own?
Theoretically possible to do it without a dictionary.
Yes, that's the threshold.
Okay.
So I can walk into
Yeah.
downtown Atlanta and I can understand probably 75-80% of what they're saying without a dictionary.
Surprised, to be honest.
No, I can. I've been to downtown Chattanooga.
Not even close.
Okay.
But anyway,
The point maybe
You might be able to.
maybe I'm wrong,
It depends on who's around.
but I'd say you've got a much
Wide
better
variety of people.
you've got a much better case saying that's a different language than this, because
Also, downtown Atlanta, you'll hear just about anything. You'll hear like
well, it's fair. You'll hear
Reagan,
anything.
you'll hear Chinese, you'll hear.
But with this sentence, every single person who is moderately capable of wielding the English language. So, not children, not people who speak English as a second language, not particularly low IQ individuals,
That's interesting.
but most people who are moderately capable of wielding the English language are going to be able to, with enough time, sit down and figure out what that sentence means.
So
what they are not going to do, probably, is spend the time to do it. They'd rather pay me to do that for
So
them.
let's say I sit down, I read this contract.
What does it mean?
Well, hold on. Let me finish my
Okay.
thinking. Let's say I sit here and I spend the 4 hours it takes me to parse this paragraph. Let's say that for some reason it's the only paragraph in the whole contract,
Okay.
just for ease of
Okay.
communication. So I sit down and I spend like 4 hours reading through this paragraph and interpreting it. Will I have a full understanding of what it is what it is meaning in such a way that I can reasonably say, yeah, I understand this well enough that I have no issue whatsoever signing this contract?
Absolutely.
See, I don't agree at all.
With that force majeure clause, absolutely. So, for example,
Well,
let's read it. I'm going to read it to you. No party shall be liable or responsible to another party, nor may be deemed to have defaulted under a breach of this agreement for any failure or delay in fulfilling or performing any term of this agreement, except obligations made previously. Except for any obligations to make previously owed payments to another party hereunder. When and to the extent that such failure or delay is caused by results or acts beyond the impacted party's reasonable control. What does that mean?
so it sounds to me that it basically says no one's responsible for things outside of their control
You will not be held liable or responsible
by this contract.
for non-performance of the contract based on things that are outside your control.
Okay.
That's basically what you said.
Non-performance of the contract, meaning breaking it.
Yeah. Breach of the agreement, failure, or performing any term under the agreement.
Okay.
Etc.
So I will grant you that this one overall is fairly simple. I still think that the structure of this is not a typical English structure. I think it's
It's atypical, but it's not its own language. It's just atypical.
so. I think I'm going to need to think about this a little more. But I see where you're coming from, and
And by the way, it goes on to give examples of things that are outside your control that will excuse your non-performance.
Yeah.
So it explains it further. It defines force majeure events as things that or frustrate the purpose of the agreement. A, acts of God. That is self-explanatory. Lightning strikes you dead. Okay.
It's self-explanatory if you assume.
B, flood, fire, earthquake, or explosion. C, war, invasion, hostilities.
Pause for just a second. Is this an exclusive or inclusive list? Like, does this include every single thing that?
Including, without limitation. That's in there. We always make sure that all that stuff is in there. But that's good thinking. That's lawyer thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is something most people are not going to think of, and it's baked
Yeah.
into the language of legalese.
But
If you don't,
It's
think
still
like
not distinct enough to call it. It is more distinct. It's not exactly the same.
So here's
It's
the
not distinct enough to cross the threshold of being its own language.
If I use English words, but I restructure the grammatical structure of the sentence, is it still English?
There's a threshold in which it won't be, but legalese doesn't breach that threshold.
See, I think it at least rides really close.
Perhaps could.
I'm cool to call this a really archaic dialect.
It is somewhat archaic. Yeah, you're right. I would
Less so than it used to be. Because
much less so than it used to.
Congress has passed some things I know saying I think it's Congress. I've seen some Reagan. I'm talking to you about this, so I'm because you're an attorney, you keep up to date on all this stuff. So I'm gonna look like I don't know. But I saw a thing. Congress is trying to have laws, at least on a federal level, laws specifically written in more regular English.
I don't think that's a specific
I don't
law
know.
that's been passed.
It
What
was
it
like
is?
It's like a motion.
No, what the only thing that I am
An act.
basically familiar with is there is a concept in law where the law has to be understandable to the common man in order to be enforced upon the common man. Like Like, if you're going to promulgate a law, you can't promulgate it in Greek and expect your English published.
No one uses that word except for attorneys.
No, I've heard it used by politicians,
Same
people
thing.
who are in the law. So, okay,
Yeah, law.
if you're going to publish a law, distribute a law, and expect people to follow it, you can't publish it in Greek and expect a bunch of English speakers to follow it. There is a concept in the law that it has to be understandable to the common man in order to be enforced. And so, to that end, as language changes,
It needs to be a language.
no, I don't care. I just don't think it is.
I
So because of that, laws people try to write laws in as plain English as they can. But here's the problem. Here's where
the more
legalese
plain
develops.
you get, the less loopholes you cover.
Yeah,
And
that's how
legalese, and that's why I think
legalese is the anti-loophole dialect.
Yes.
The legalese is every time you write a sentence, you think, what are all the possible interpretations of this sentence, and how could that be used against me?
I think to me, one thing that separates it into at least almost its own full language is I think the act of focusing entirely on loopholes actually changes the language dramatically.
But it's
A large focus.
It's not so much loopholes
I
as
see.
making sure there is no possible way that I can be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
That's
I
the point.
would put it as a separate language, but in the same family of languages as English. Dialects, fair enough. But also, okay, I want to talk about English for a second, though.
Okay.
Because I actually don't consider English a language.
Well, it's stupid because